Emily Carter never imagined that a quiet morning in her Portland home would turn into the beginning of something that would shake her entire world. But that was exactly what happened when her husband Daniel spoke in a calm, almost too casual voice while adjusting his jacket for work, telling her that he had booked her a trip without asking first. And at first, Emily laughed softly, thinking it was a surprise meant to bring them closer. Yet the feeling did not last long because Daniel continued speaking quickly, explaining that the trip was already planned, the tickets confirmed, the hotel reserved, and the dates set. And before she could interrupt, he added that she would be traveling with two of his business partners, Marcus Thompson and Jordan Hayes, names she recognized but faces she barely knew. And in that moment, the kitchen felt smaller, the air heavier, as Emily tried to process why her husband would send her away with people who were almost strangers, and she asked gently if he was serious, hoping he would laugh and say it was a joke, but Daniel only smiled, saying she deserved a break, that she had been quiet lately, distant, and that Vancouver would do her good. His words sounding caring yet strangely rehearsed, and as he spoke, Emily noticed how he avoided her eyes, how his phone buzzed with messages he kept checking, how his attention was already drifting away. And memories rushed into her mind of evenings spent alone, dinners eaten in silence, conversations cut short by work calls, and nights when Daniel came to bed already exhausted, leaving no room for questions or closeness. And suddenly this trip felt less like a gift and more like a solution to a problem he did not want to face. And Emily tried to argue softly, saying it felt strange, saying she did not know Marcus and Jordan well, but Daniel dismissed her concerns with a light tone, saying they were good men, respectful, trustworthy, and that he trusted Emily completely, a sentence that landed in her chest with confusing weight, because trust should have felt comforting, yet it felt like a door closing instead, and before she could say anything more, Daniel kissed her cheek, grabbed his bag, and rushed out, leaving Emily standing alone with unanswered questions and a quiet fear she could not name. And the rest of the day passed in a blur as she packed her suitcase, folding clothes with shaky hands, replaying the conversation again and again, wondering when her marriage had shifted from shared decisions to quiet announcements and the night. Before the flight, she barely slept, staring at the ceiling while rain tapped against the window, thinking about the woman she used to be before routines took over, before her dreams slowly faded into the background. And when morning came, she found herself at the airport, surrounded by strangers and announcements echoing through the terminal, feeling like she was stepping into a story she did not choose but could no longer avoid. And that was when she saw Marcus and Jordan waiting near the gate, both dressed neatly, both smiling politely as they greeted her. And Emily noticed immediately that their energy was different from Daniel's, calmer, warmer, less rushed. And as they walked together toward the plane, small talk filling the space between them, Emily felt an unexpected sense of ease mixed with confusion, because she should have felt nervous, but instead she felt strangely seen. As Marcus asked about her interests and Jordan joked lightly to ease the tension. And when the plane finally took off, Emily looked out the window as the city disappeared beneath the clouds, realizing that this trip was already pulling her away from the life she had been quietly enduring. And she did not know yet what waited for her on the other side. But deep inside, she felt that something important was about to change. Something she could no longer ignore, something that would force her to face the truth about her marriage, her loneliness, and the parts of herself she had left behind. And as the plane moved forward into the open sky, Emily understood that this was not just a journey to another city, but the first step into a chapter she never expected to begin. Emily stepped into Vancouver with a mix of nerves and quiet curiosity. and the city greeted her with cool air, tall glass buildings, and mountains rising in the distance like calm witnesses to whatever she was about to discover. And from the moment they left the airport, Marcus and Jordan treated her with an ease that surprised her, not in a loud or careless way, but with simple respect, asking if she was tired, offering coffee, pointing out streets and views as if they wanted her to feel included rather than escorted. And as the taxi moved through the city, Emily felt something inside her loosen, a tension she had carried for years without realizing it. And once they reached the hotel, Marcus explained the conference schedule while Jordan suggested places she might enjoy exploring on her own, never assuming she needed guidance, and that small details stayed with her because it reminded her of how rarely anyone asked what she wanted anymore. And later that afternoon, they walked along the harbor, the water calm, the sky wide and open, and Emily found herself talking more than she planned, sharing small stories about her life, about Portland, about how she once loved painting but had not picked up a brush in years. And Marcus listened closely, not interrupting, while Jordan reacted with honest interest. And there was no awkwardness, no hidden tone. It's just conversation flowing naturally. And as they sat on a bench watching boats drift by, Emily realized how long it had been since she felt this present, this awake, because back home her days felt like routines stitched together without meaning, and here everything felt sharper, clearer. And when Marcus asked her how long she and Daniel had been married, Emily answered automatically. But the words felt hollow in her mouth, and she noticed how carefully she chose what to say next, avoiding details, avoiding truths, and Jordan sensed it too, shifting the topic gently, telling a story about growing up in Seattle, about mistakes and second chances, and Emily listened, thinking about how everyone carried invisible weight. Yet some people learned to speak about it, while others buried it under work and silence. And as evening approached, they stopped at a small restaurant near the water. Nothing fancy, just warm lights and quiet music. Oh. And while they ate, Emily checked her phone, half expecting a message from Daniel asking how she was doing. But there was nothing, and she felt a sharp sting of disappointment that she tried to ignore. And Marcus noticed her expression change, asking softly if everything was okay, and Emily smiled, saying she was just tired, but the truth sat heavy in her chest, because the distance between her and her husband felt wider now that she was away, not smaller like she had hoped. And after dinner they walked back slowly, the city glowing around them. And Emily realized she did not want the night to end because of romance, but because for the first time in a long time she felt understood without having to explain herself. And back in her room, she stood by the window, watching traffic move below like a quiet river of light, thinking about Daniel's calm smile that morning, about how easily he had let her go. And the thought unsettled her, because it felt less like trust and more like relief. And the next day moved even faster, filled with walks through Stanley Park, laughter over simple jokes, long conversations about dreams that were delayed but not dead. And Emily felt herself opening in ways she had forgotten were possible, sharing thoughts she usually kept locked away, admitting that she felt invisible in her own marriage, that love had turned into habit, and neither Marcus nor Jordan offered advice or judgment. They only listened, and that silence, that space, felt powerful. And later that afternoon, while watching the ocean crash gently against rocks, Marcus asked her a question that stayed with her long after he spoke it, asking if she believed people were meant to stay the same forever or if growth sometimes required discomfort. And Emily did not answer right away, because the question felt too close to the truth she was avoiding. And when she finally spoke, she said she did not know who she was growing into anymore. And that admission felt like both a loss and a release. And that night, alone again in her room, Emily called Daniel, hoping to hear warmth, hoping the distance would make him miss her. But the conversation was short, polite, distracted, filled with pauses where she could hear typing on the other end. And when they hung up, Emily sat on the edge of the bed feeling emptier than before, realizing that this trip was not fixing anything between them. It was revealing what had already been broken, and as she lay awake listening to the city outside, she understood that Vancouver was not changing her. It was simply reminding her of the parts of herself that had been ignored for too long. And that realization scared her more than the trip itself. Because once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. And Emily sensed that whatever came next would demand courage she was not sure she had. But deep down, she knew there was no turning back now. The third day of the trip began early, the city still quiet and the sky painted in soft gray light. And Emily felt restless in a way she could not explain, as if something inside her was pushing forward, demanding attention. And when Marcus and Jordan suggested a drive along the coast before their afternoon meetings, she agreed without hesitation, eager to keep moving, eager to avoid sitting alone with her thoughts. And as they left the city behind, the road opened into wide views of water and mountains, the kind of beauty that made silence feel meaningful instead of awkward. And during the drive, Jordan played music low in the background while Marcus focused on the road. And Emily watched the scenery rush past, feeling like her own life had been paused for years while everything else kept moving. And without planning to, she started talking, not about small things, but about her past, about how she once dreamed of teaching art, about nights spent painting until her hands were sore, about how marriage slowly shifted her priorities until those dreams felt childish and impractical. And Marcus listened without judgment, occasionally nodding, never rushing her words, while Jordan asked simple questions that showed he truly cared. And Emily realized how rare that felt, to speak freely without feeling like she was taking up too much space. And when they stopped at a quiet lookout, the ocean stretching endlessly below, Emily stepped out of the car and breathed deeply, the wind cool against her face, and in that moment something inside her cracked open. Not painfully, but honestly. And she admitted that she did not recognize herself anymore, that she had become careful, quiet, and small. And Marcus spoke calmly, saying that people often confuse sacrifice with disappearance, and that love should not erase identity. And those words hit her harder than she expected, because they described her life perfectly. And as they stood there, Emily felt tears rise, not from sadness alone, but from relief, because someone finally named what she had been feeling for years, and the drive back was quieter, heavier with thought. And later that afternoon, Emily walked alone through a small art gallery near the hotel, drawn inside without thinking. And as she moved from painting to painting, she felt a deep ache, a longing that reminded her of who she used to be. She imagined herself holding a brush again, imagined color on canvas, imagined choosing something for herself without guilt. And when she returned to the hotel, she tried calling Daniel again, this time determined to be honest, to share what she was feeling, but the call felt strained. His answer short, his attention divided, and when she mentioned feeling lost, he replied with practical advice instead of concern, telling her she was just tired and would feel better once she was home. And that response made something inside her go quiet, 'cause she realized he was not listening, he was managing. And after the call ended, Emily sat in silence, staring at the wall, understanding that the distance between them was not caused by this trip. It had existed long before, hidden under routines and comfort. And that evening, Marcus and Jordan invited her to dinner, sensing she needed company, and over the meal, Emily spoke with more clarity than before, admitting that she felt lonely in her marriage, that she felt invisible even when standing beside her husband, and neither man tried to fix her feelings. They simply acknowledged them, and that acceptance felt powerful. And Marcus told her that awareness was the first step toward change, whether that change led forward or apart. And those words stayed with her long after dinner ended, and back in her room, Emily packed slowly, folding clothes with care, knowing the trip was almost over. And instead of feeling relief, she felt fear, because going home meant facing the truth she could no longer ignore. And as she lay in bed listening to the distant sounds of the city, Emily understood that this journey was not about attraction or escape. It was about clarity, about seeing herself honestly for the first time in years. And she knew that whatever choice she made next would shape the rest of her life. And that knowledge was heavy, but it also felt strangely empowering. Because for the first time, the future did not feel decided for her. It felt open, uncertain, and real. Asterisk, the final day arrived faster than Emily expected, and she woke before sunrise, with a clear mind and a heavy heart, knowing that whatever she decided next would not be delayed any longer. And as she packed her suitcase for the last time, she did not feel sadness about leaving Vancouver. She felt gratitude, because the city had given her something she had been missing for years: honesty. And when she met Marcus and Jordan for breakfast, there was a quiet understanding between them. No dramatic words, no emotional speeches, just calm respect. And as they ate, Emily thanked them sincerely, telling them that their kindness and patience had helped her see herself more clearly. And Marcus replied that sometimes people do not need answers from others, they only need the right silence to hear their own thoughts. And those words stayed with her as they said goodbye at the hotel entrance. The moment simple yet meaningful, because this chapter of her journey was closing exactly as it should, without confusion or regret. And on the flight home, Emily stared out the window, not lost in fear this time, but focused, replaying moments from the past few days and understanding that the trip had not changed her values or crossed any lines. It had simply reminded her that she deserved to feel alive within her own life. And when the plane landed in Portland, she felt steady, prepared, and when Daniel picked her up, his smile felt familiar but distant. And on the drive home, they exchanged small talk, weather comments, work updates, safe words that avoided the truth sitting between them. And once inside the house, Emily did not unpack. She sat at the dining table and asked Daniel to sit with her, her voice calm but firm, and he noticed immediately that something had shifted. And Emily spoke clearly, telling him that the trip had opened her eyes, that she felt lonely in their marriage, that she missed emotional connection, missed being seen, missed being more than a routine partner in a shared life. And Daniel listened in silence, surprised, uncomfortable, but unable to dismiss her words. And when he finally spoke, he admitted that he had felt the distance too, but did not know how to fix it, that sending her on the trip felt easier than facing hard conversations, and that honesty hurt. But it also cleared the fog that had surrounded them for years. And instead of arguing, they talked deeply for the first time in a long while about expectations, fears, missed chances, and the quiet ways people drift when they stop choosing each other daily. And Emily made it clear that she was not asking for perfection. She was asking for effort, presence, and respect. And Daniel admitted he had taken stability for granted, assuming love would survive without attention, and they agreed that something had to change, whether together or apart. And in the weeks that followed, they began counseling, not as a dramatic rescue attempt, but as an honest effort to understand each other again. And Emily returned to painting, setting up a small studio in the spare room, filling the space with color and purpose. And Daniel supported her, learning to listen rather than fix, to ask rather than assume. And while their marriage did not instantly become perfect, it became real, grounded in truth instead of habit. And Emily felt stronger each day, not because someone else gave her strength, but because she reclaimed it herself. And one afternoon, a postcard arrived from Vancouver, simple and thoughtful, signed by Marcus and Jordan, reminding her to never forget who she was meant to be, and Emily smiled, placing it beside her easel. Knowing that the trip had not been about temptation or escape, it had been about awakening. And as she stood in her studio watching sunlight fall across her canvas, she realized that sometimes the most unexpected journeys are not meant to take you away from your life, but to bring you back to it with open eyes and a braver heart. And that understanding stayed with her, steady and lasting, as she stepped forward into a future she was finally choosing for herself.